Okay, our cookies are baked and are cooling, so now it's time to move on to icing. In this session, I will show you how to make both royal icing and cookie glaze. Alright, now that we've got our cookies made, let's move on to our icings so we can decorate cookies. First icing we're going to make is royal icing. That's what you see mostly on all those beautifully decorated cookies that dry to that hard, shiny shell. Few very simple ingredients. This is the easiest way to make it. There's lots of recipes using regular egg whites. I strongly recommend going out, getting some Wilton meringue powder. You can order meringue powder online. It's basically dried egg whites, cornstarch, and some stabilizers and preservatives. Shelf stable for a very long time. We're using it for icing. You can use it also to make meringue, those beautiful meringue cookies that are popular right now. I have 1 pound of powdered sugar. We have 3 tablespoons of the meringue powder. I'm just going to put that on top. It's very light, very airy. You can see how it puffs up right away. And we have 5 tablespoons of warm water. Warm water is going to help activate our egg whites, help the powdered sugar dissolve. I'm just going to kind of pour that all around. When you buy your canister or carton of meringue powder, there will be instructions to use. You can follow those instructions on the container as well. Normally I do this in my stand mixer because I'm doing such a large batch. For a single batch today, a hand mixer is just fine. I'm going to start on low so we don't get powdered sugar everywhere. Let this get mixed in. You can see how that water is getting absorbed and everything's getting smaller and smaller. I'm going to turn this up. Now I'm going to go to high. And we're going to whip this for a few minutes to get those egg whites rehydrated and start to fluff up. We don't want to whip this like we are making meringue to top a pie or to make meringue cookies or to make macarons, because we don't want a lot of air in our icing. Air in the icing is going to come out when we ice our cookies, and we won't have flat, beautiful iced cookies. They're going to have holes in them. This is going to make super thick royal icing. We are going to thin this down to be able to use it. This will last for a couple weeks in your refrigerator. You can also freeze it for a couple months. You're going to have to thaw it in the refrigerator or bring it to room temperature if it's been in the refrigerator, so you can re-whip it and use it again. We're going to stop for a second, give this a scrape down. Baking's a messy business. Don't worry about making a mess. Take care of it when you're done. So you can see how super thick this is. Not falling off the spoon. That would really be hard to pipe onto a cookie, right? So what we are going to do, get my handy deli container. I'm going to take a little bit out and put it to the side. If we happen to thin our icing out too much, this is not like a cookie glaze or a powdered sugar buttercream where we can just add more powdered sugar. It doesn't exactly work to thicken back up. We're going to use this thick to thicken this back up if we go too thin. I have a little spray bottle of water because I want to add just a little at a time. You can do this very carefully by droplets of water. Just don't go dumping more than, say, a half a teaspoon in at a time, because it will thin out very quickly. What we are looking for is that we can drizzle the icing off of a spatula and it will become completely smooth in about 15 seconds on top of the icing. So let's blend this water in. I can already tell we're going to need more water, right? And stop. Do another spray. Do 5. Because we have our backup, our insurance policy, we can add more of our thick icing back in. If you are doing this in a stand mixer, if your parents have a KitchenAid, be very careful you don't overmix this with the whip attachment, because then you'll have meringue, you won't have royal icing. and it will be very hard to decorate your cookies. It will be very fluffy, marshmallowy, and will not decorate well. So I do like doing this with a hand mixer if you're just getting started, so you don't overdo it. You can tell we still need more water. We'll do one more. See where we're at. We might start mixing this by hand. Oh yeah, we're getting better, but we're starting to get a little more meringue-ish as opposed to frosting-ish. If that makes any sense. So I'm gonna work this by hand, but it's still thick. You can see it's not falling off the spatula, what we like to call ribbon. So 2, 3, 4, 5 more. And let's mix this in by hand. Doing it by hand will help knock out any air if we've added too much air from mixing it, especially if you're doing this in a stand mixer. I do like to make all of my icings, whether it's this royal icing or the cookie glaze, a day ahead. Doing so gives the icing a chance to rest, and if there are air bubbles in it, then they will come to the surface, and then when we go to re-stir our icing before we use it, or if we're going to mix in our colors, then it will pop all the air bubbles and you'll have a much better look to your cookie. So let's see. That's falling up, but that's a pretty big clump still. So let's do another 5 sprays of water. So this is the same technique, whether this is the royal icing or the cookie glaze we're going to make next. To little by little add water to get us to that 15-second flood icing consistency. So we're starting to get more of a ribbon. Not quite there yet. Let's give it another stir. Give that water a chance to rehydrate the powdered sugar and egg whites, because everything is dry. Still big clumps. Let's do another 1, 2, 3, 4. And gently, I'm just kind of going underneath, folding the icing over. This is a great technique to learn folding. So I come underneath and bring the top over the bottom, cut through the middle. If you ever decide to try macarons, you're going to do a lot of folding. All right, let's see what our ribbon looks like now. Still a little clumpy. Those ribbons aren't really settling smoothly back into the icing yet. So what are we gonna do? We are close though, we're very close. This is the most important part of the icing, is getting the consistency just right so it will flood your cookies and you'll have a nice smooth finish to them. If you want to do things like writing or maybe piping lines or dots or flowers, you're going to come back to that stiff icing that we set aside, and you're going to use that to pipe your decorations that you want to stand out or give texture to and not be completely flat. So you'll see that when we do our decorating video. Let's see where we're at. Nice ribbon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Still a little more than 15. I'm looking at this spot right here. I still see the ribbon on top. We're gonna do 4 more sprays of water, and then I think we will be pretty close. So we're gonna let this rest while we move on to our cookie glaze next. Like I said, normally I let this rest overnight so any air bubbles can pop to the surface. Everything gets a chance to hydrate, all the dry ingredients in the water, makes a big difference. But I want to get it close to consistency I want to use, so I'm not spending all my time on decorating day trying to get the right consistency. So let's try again. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We're at about 20 seconds. Do just 2 more squirts. 1, 2. And then we're going to pack it up in a deli container to let it rest overnight in the refrigerator. This is egg whites. So we do want to have this refrigerated if we're not using it within a few hours. So that's looking beautiful and shiny, not full of air, nice ribboning. That looks beautiful. So that's going to get packed up in a larger deli container, or I could split it up into smaller containers for our different colors. We're going to pack that up and move on to our cookie glaze. Okay, now that our royal icing is made, we're going to move on to cookie glaze. I started out with royal icing. I actually prefer cookie glaze now. Cookie glaze is very simple: powdered sugar, corn syrup, a little bit of water, a little bit of flavoring, and that's it. It dries hard just like royal icing. The downside is that there are some little tricks to get it really thick if you wanted a pipe for letters or flowers or, real definition. But it doesn't dry out the cookies, and I think it tastes better because it doesn't have that egg white in there. So let's make our glaze. Super, super easy. We have 1 pound of powdered sugar in here, corn syrup. We have got my favorite measuring tool for liquids that are sticky, like honey, corn syrup, peanut butter, sour cream, yogurt, anything that's kind of hard to measure or sticky that doesn't want to come out of your measuring cup. I love this. So we're just going to turn this over, squish our corn syrup out, grab a little baby spatula and just scrape that off, and that's it. No fuss, no mess. Set that aside. We have got a couple tablespoons of water. We are going to add a little bit of vanilla extract. I have vanilla bean paste here. You can also get clear vanilla extract. You could also use a lemon or an orange or a peppermint or whatever other flavors you like. We're going to add that. The last ingredient we're going to add, which we did not do with our royal icing because it's much whiter, is a white gel food coloring. This one's from Wilton. You can find this at Michael's. You can get other brands online. And put about a tablespoon in there. Set that aside. What the white icing is going to do is make this white, first of all, so we have white icing, but also it makes it more opaque, less transparent. So when we go to color it with other food coloring, our reds or greens or golds or whatever other colors we want for our holiday cookies, it will take the color much better. It won't take as much coloring because we have that white base in there already. So let's go ahead and we're going to mix this with our hand mixer. You can also do this in a stand mixer if you have one available. Just like our royal icing, we are going to start on low. We don't want to mix it on too high a speed. 1, we don't want a powdered sugar shower all over our kitchen. And 2, just like the other royal icing, we don't want a lot of air mixed in, so we don't have a lot of air bubbles. And just like the royal icing, I like to mix this a day ahead so it has a chance to sit. You will see the air bubbles really come to the surface. And then you just stir and they go away and you have super smooth icing. So let's get all of that off of there. Let's take a look at our cookie glaze and give this a stir. We're looking for the same thing. We're looking for the same consistency, that 15-second. You can tell this is much thinner than the royal icing when we first mixed it. That is because we do not have the egg whites in here. So it's not as stiff and as fluffy. So now we get a nice ribbon right away. We're going to do our count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's perfect. You can see our cookie glaze has a nice smooth consistency, ready to rest. Rehydrate a little bit, let all those air bubbles come to the surface. If we had put in too much water, this is one time we can add a little more powdered sugar. If, say, this was less than a 15 count, if it was too thin, we add powdered sugar to thicken this back up. But this looks really good. We're going to set this aside into our deli container to rest, just like our royal icing, and then we will be ready to color it and decorate. Alright, next up is how to fill our piping bag. I have got a Wilton 12-inch disposable piping bag here. They come in 12, 14, 18, 22, 16, all different sizes. Stick with the 12-inch. It's going to be much easier for you to control and have a better product until you become that expert piper. The other pieces we have, this is called a coupler. There are two pieces to the coupler. This piece goes inside the bag. This holds the tip on the outside. I like this if I want to change tips, so use the same color frosting, but different types of piping tips to get different results. I'm going to put in a number 2 round tip. It's a very small round tip for writing piping lines, piping dots. When I want to be precise, I'm going to use this number 2. You could just put the tip straight into the bag. If I want to change my tip, however, I'm going to use the coupler. So the larger piece is going to go into the bag. I'm going to push it towards the bottom, but I don't want to push it in tight because I'm going to need to take it back out for in a minute. I just want to see how far down I need to cut my piping bag. So I want to cut my piping bag. There's threads on here. I'm going to kind of make a mark with my scissors right where those threads stop. I can always cut more off. I can never put the piping bag back together and then I've wasted a whole piping bag. So I just kind of slid the coupler back out of the way. I can see my mark and I'm going to cut straight across. Now I can push my coupler so it's locked in securely. Then I take my piping tip, I put that on. I take this ring and this screws on top of the piping bag right into the coupler on the inside and holds that in place. So then if I wanted to say do something else with my icing I'm putting in here, unscrew this, put on a different tip, maybe a star tip to make a wreath looking pattern or stars or something with swirls, and then I don't have to get a whole new piping bag. I have a pint glass. This is going to act as my third hand. This is a great way to fill your piping bag, whether it is with icing, buttercream, you name it. Normally, I just fold this top over. I am right-handed, and I fold this over my left hand until I get to see the logo, and there's that max fill line. So I'm gonna fold this over pretty far down. We don't want to overfill our piping bags for 2 reasons. One, it's going to shoot out the top until you become an expert at holding a piping bag, and 2, it's harder to control what's happening down here. So you're not going to have straight lines, your dots are going to be all different sizes, you're not going to have a good experience. So I have that folded down so that max fill line's about right there. I do it on my hand and I just put the icing in. Sometimes, however, it is much easier to just put this over a drinking glass. And then I have 2 hands free. This is holding my piping bag for me. Here's a great example. You can see how that icing, all the air bubbles have come to the surface. This was made about 4 hours ago. So I'm going to give it a stir. Get those air bubbles popped. It looks nice and smooth. I want to make sure I still have my 15-second consistency, or thicker if you want to do dots and lines that are going to stand up and be in 3D. Make sure you're at least at 20 seconds. So that is looking good for what I want to do. And then I can just drop this into here. Kind of push it against my thumb to scrape off the spatula. If you have a little narrower glass, you can actually scrape the spatula off on the top of the glass. All right, I'm gonna call that good. Put the lid back on so this doesn't dry out. Then I can take my piping bag off here. Save your glass because it's a great place. You can just put this right back into the glass to hold it for you if you switch to another color. I'm just gonna unfold that bag. So you can see my icing is definitely below or almost at that max fill line. This, you can see, this is our flood consistency. It's already starting to kind of drip out, which is where the glass is very handy. One nice little trick, if you kind of made a mess, you have icing all the way up at the top. This is a plastic bowl scraper. If you see this when we do our cookie dough, right? This way to scoop it out, and we're gonna use the flat side so we can now smooth our icing out and push it back down to the bottom. So as you're piping, if you have trouble keeping this closed and your icing squirts up to the top, just lay it down flat, grab your bowl scraper, and push it back down. Now, we have a flat bag. I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you're gonna do the opposite. I'm going to squeeze this bag with this part of my hand, right between my thumb and my pointer finger. I'm gonna grab it like that. I'm going to give it, I'm gonna put this underneath here, 1 or 2 turns. I now have pressure. I can feel the pressure in this piping bag, and you can see the icing is starting to come out. By giving it a turn, it's gonna stop it from shooting up the top. As I'm piping, all of the pressure for what I'm doing is coming from this part of my hand, from these fingers. I'm not squeezing down here. I don't want my left hand even anywhere near here. I should be able to just squeeze the piping bag with my 3 fingers and pipe my design. So you'll see when we get to decorating our cookies, I can use this to outline the cookie, then I squeeze harder to fill in the cookie, or I can use this to write whatever I want to write, or to make dots, if we're doing something with dots. After I pipe for a little bit, the icing has gone down, I'm gonna have to come back. I kind of pull it down again, give it another turn, just 2 turns. I tend to see a lot of people like have this whole thing twisted, and you've got this all twisted up here like this. You can't get any pressure to pipe. Let it go, unravel it. Don't worry if your icing gets on the counter. We've got a ton of icing, more than we'll need. Give it 2 twists and you're ready to pipe again. I'm gonna fold this over so that'll kind of keep it in place, or you can put it back into your drinking glass and let it stay there. All right, let's talk now about coloring our icing. This applies for whether it's royal icing or cookie glaze. I've got some glaze here I made a little while ago. You can see it's been sitting for a few hours. You can see the air bubbles have come to the surface. This is why we want to make it ahead of time and let it rest. Otherwise, those air bubbles are going to affect the consistency of our finished product. We're going to have holes from the air bubbles when they come to the surface. So, give this a little stir to get those air bubbles popped. And we have a couple of different icing colors we can use. I'm going to make green. So I have a leaf green gel. I've got a blue and yellow. If you remember back to your days in kindergarten and finger painting, blue and yellow makes green, right? And I also have brown. Anytime I'm making colors, no matter what color it is, well, maybe not white, I'm going to add a tiny toothpick of brown to it. It just gives the color more depth, makes it not look so fake. So we're going to set that aside. You notice these are all gel colors. They are not liquid colors that you get in those little squeeze bottles at the grocery store. Please don't use those. Those are going to thin out your icing. They're not going to give you a good product. They don't dry well. They're not a very nice color. So these all I got online. This I got at a local store. This is Wilton. You can get these at Joann or Michael's. Easy to find. Just sometimes even Safeway is starting to carry the Wilton colors. So I'm going to start with a couple different things. I'm going to use green. So we're going to put in a big drop of this green. Just one. We can always add more. We can't take it away. I'm going for a nice dark holiday green. And to give it more depth of color, I'm going to add blue and yellow. And give these a little shake. You can also find recipes online for how many drops of the colors to put in. I'm going to just do roughly 1 of each and start with that. I'm going to save the brown till the very end once I have a green that I'm happy with, and then we'll add the brown just to finish it off. You may want to consider wearing gloves when you deal with icing colors, because they do get on your hands, they get on your clothes, but they do come out fairly easily. Some colors come out easier than others. I find purple likes to stain. So we're just going to fold this in. Wow, that's looking interesting. And I like to use these clear deli containers for this purpose because I can see where I haven't gotten my color mixed in yet. So I know I've got to scrape with my spatula to get all that white icing combined with the color. I am actually kind of liking this. It's a little minty green, which is where our drops of brown are going to come in handy. Same thing with red. A little drop of brown gives us a nice Christmassy red color, if that's what you're going for. So, I can see I've still got some white on the bottom. To make sure we get all that mixed in, I've got some green color on the side here. That's where these baby spatulas are wonderful tools. I bought 10 of these because when you're making lots of frosting colors, you need them. All right, so that's a very decent green. I'm gonna get a toothpick and get my brown, give it a shake. Always give these a shake. Pro tip, whenever you are doing a dark color or you want a darker color, don't feel like you have to add lots of color. This is where you're definitely going to make it the day ahead and let it rest overnight. The color will deepen as it combines and rehydrates with your icing. So I literally just have a tiny hint of brown on that toothpick. I'm going to stir it in, scrape it off on my spatula. I am not going to use this again. I do not want to touch this to my containers. If I touch this into my icing, this is now contaminated and it's going to go bad and I have to throw it away. If I don't contaminate these containers, they will last for years. They'll dry up before they go bad. So let's give that brown a stir. Sometimes at first it doesn't look great, looks kind of weird. Keep stirring. And that just kind of takes it from a minty green to a nicer holiday green. Make sure we got all of our food color mixed in from the sides. Now we have a Christmassy green for leaves or wreaths or whatever other green stripes decorations we want to make. So that is how to color your icing. I'm going to put my lid back on so this doesn't dry out, and we'll move on to the next.